Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to first start out by asking, how many of you are graduating within the next year? What about within the next semester, like this semester? Okay, and how many of you know exactly what you're doing after graduation? Okay, cool. Glad we're on the same page, most of us, of not knowing exactly what our next steps are. And honestly, most of the time, I'm graduating this semester, and most of the time that I think about it, I get really anxious because I love change, but this is just a scary change. You know, growing up, you're like, oh, well, I'm going on to high school now, you know, I'm going on to college now, and this is like so many paths to take. And like as a kid, I even loved change. I was one of those that while my mom was at work, I'd rearrange my bedroom, and she'd come home and, you know, I'd be like, all right, close your eyes, and bring her in there. She'd act surprised like 5 times a week. Eventually ran out of ways to rearrange it, but I love change, so I would do that pretty often. And this is just change that I'm not ready for, and change that I am excited to see what God's going to do, but I just feel like so unprepared and so inadequate. So in a weird way, it's kind of comforting to see a lot of your hands not raised, that we're all in this together, and we trust God with what he's going to do. And so Paul has a little bit more confidence than me in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. And he writes, "Therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from you. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Yeah, that's the confidence I want, but I have not achieved yet. I do not delight in persecution quite yet. I'm praying to get there one day, but I'm hoping that I'm not just preaching to you guys, but this is kind of like an us, we're getting through this together kind of thing. So I've found myself over the past few weeks calling back to Proverbs 16:9, which says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And so I've been planning for this time to come. I ordered my cap and gown today. Like, I am excited for April 30th to be here, but I know that the Lord's plan is going to be so much more sovereign over mine and so much greater than anything I could think of. So this passage, my main point from 2 Corinthians is that these feelings of inadequacy or not being prepared or just not being ready to move on, that just leaves more room for Christ to be perfected in our lives, for his power to be exalted in us. And so our inadequacy is just Christ's perfection in us. And so in Philippians 4:12, Paul writes, "I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through whom it gives me strength." So, because we are ministry majors, we understand that Philippians 4:13 is not what most take out of context to be, but it's that we're content in all things, and that we are, content in all situations, content not knowing exactly what we're doing after graduation, because the Lord is with us. And so, I've been knocking on a lot of doors this past semester, a lot of doors, and honestly, not a lot of them have opened yet. Quite precisely, none of them have opened yet. So I just know that through this, I can be content because God's gonna bring some open door into my life and going to provide some awesome opportunity for me that I'm gonna be glad I waited for and didn't stress over and stayed content. So I just kind of wanted to encourage you guys to start knocking on doors. Encourage you guys, even if you aren't graduating for another, 3 years, you maybe double majored or something, start knocking on doors, get involved in your local ministry. If there's anything I've learned from my senior capstone class, it is get involved in the local church, and that's going to get you so far, so much experience, and honestly just bring a lot of joy into your life. And so Paul says in verse 9 that he boasts about his weaknesses in order for Christ's power to rest on him. It sounds kind of like self-deprecating humor, like boasting your weaknesses, but that's not what Paul's talking about here. He's talking about boasting in weaknesses where Christ has made you great. And so what part of yourself would be incomplete if it wasn't for Jesus? I boast in my weakness of not being very good at public speaking because, as you can see now, Christ meets me up here every time I preach. And so I get to boast in that, the fact that Jesus meets me when I preach. And it's not me up here, but it's the Lord speaking through me. And so I'm just glad that he's here to meet me for that. So for my exercise, I wanted to practice a little narrative sermon. And I want to speak to you as if Paul's speaking to the church, or maybe the Lord's speaking through Paul to the church, as if you guys were the church in Philippi. And so he writes, "I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. So Lord, I just thank you that you are going to complete our stories and that we don't have to write it all ourselves, God. But you've already had it written for so long. Now we can trust in that and trust in your perfect power. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.